Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. So we are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Hey Siman Tuf Nun Tes, and we are starting near the bottom of the Mechaber. We're at the Ramah on Nun Hey Amid Beis, in middle of Tuf Nun Tes Sif Aleph. So we had been speaking about the problem of kneading the matzah dough in the sunlight. We said that you cannot knead the matzah dough in the sunlight because we're worried about the sun heating up the dough, and then that will spur the dough on to become chametz. It will become chametz much more quickly in the heat of the sun. So now the Mishnah Berurah, the Ramah says Hagah in the middle of Sif Aleph here, the bottom line on Nun Hayamid Beis Hagah. Valkain Nagu, therefore the custom is Li Zaher, to take care Milolush Neged Hachaloin Hapasuach. We do not need the dough opposite an open window, afilu ein sham shemesh, even if there's no sun over there. Shema yiyeh mu'unan, maybe it'll be an overcast day, valava daite, and you will not realize. This is going back, I'm sorry, I should have said this clearly, but the Mechaber said yesterday that we can't knead the matzah dough in the sun, and the Mechaber made the point that on an overcast day, Yuma de'eva, an overcast, cloudy day, Kule Shimsha, the entire place, the entire area is any place under the open sky is considered to be sunlit. And the Mishnah Berurah explained that when it's overcast, normally when it's not cloudy outside, we say you can't knead the dough where the sun is shining. But in the shade, you could knead the dough. But on an overcast day, you can't knead the dough anywhere under the open sky. And the reason for that, the Mishnah Berurah said, is that the nature of the sun is that on an overcast day, its heat, excuse me, its heat could be felt anywhere. So you think that you're kneading the dough not in the sun, but when it's overcast, it's a little counterintuitive. When it's overcast, we view any place under the open sky as if it is in the sunlight. Therefore, the Ramah says over here, so now you're in the house, don't knead the dough opposite an open window, because you're standing opposite the open window and you look and you say, look, no sun is coming in the window. What's the problem? The problem is maybe it's overcast outside. And since it's overcast outside, we say that even where you are opposite the open window, it's considered sunlit because Yuma De'eva, an overcast day, Kule Shimsha. Says the Mishnah Berurah on Nun Vav Amid Aleph, Eis Katan Hey. Afilu ein sham shemesh. Kigoin, for example, shahachaloin pasuach lemizrach. Let's say you're sitting inside the house and you're by an open window, and that open window faces the east. V'hula shachachatzos, and you're kneading the dough after midday. Now, if you are sitting opposite an open window that opens to the east, clearly there can't be any sun coming in through that window if it's after midday. After midday, the sun is in the west of the sky. So the sun would have to come in through a western window, not through an east-facing window. So why can't you knead the dough? We know that if you're sitting opposite an east-facing window, if it's past midday, the sun is already going around towards the south. That is, when the sun travels, the sun rises in the east, it travels around to the south, and then it curves back around to the west. So after midday, it's not coming in through an east-facing window anymore. So you would think, what's the problem? I'm not kneading the dough in direct sunlight. Where I'm kneading the dough, no sun could possibly come in. Still, the Ramah over here is telling you that you still have to take care not to knead the dough opposite this open window. Mishum, Shama Yisanein Harakia Pisaim, maybe it will suddenly become cloudy outside. V'lo Yargishu, and you sitting inside the house won't realize that it became cloudy outside. V'yoma de'eva Kula Shimsha. And like the Mechaber said yesterday, an overcast day is considered to be completely sunlit. So even the sky opposite your open east-facing window is going to be considered sunlit, and it's as if the sun is coming in through your window. Even though outside you would be allowed to knead the dough in the shade. In other words, if it's a normal sunny day outside, if it's not an overcast day outside, and you want to go outside and you want to knead matzah dough in the shade, you're allowed to do that. Now, why don't we say you shouldn't be allowed to do that because maybe suddenly it will become cloudy? That's what we're saying here. We're saying you can't knead your dough opposite the open window because even though the opposite the open window where you're kneading the dough, the sun can't get in because the sun is already on the other side of the building. Still, you can't knead your dough there because there's a worry maybe suddenly it will become cloudy outside, and now that area of the sky opposite your window will be considered sunlit. So why don't we say the same thing outside? You can't knead your dough outside, even in the shade, because maybe suddenly you will become cloudy outside. And now the shady spot that you're in, even though it's a shady spot, but now that it becomes overcast outside, Kulei Shimsha. Now even this area of the sky, even the area that you are sitting in, is considered sunlit. Why don't we say that? We don't worry that suddenly it's going to become cloudy. So the Mishnah Berurah explains, Shani bachutz, when you're kneading the dough outside, that's different. The yargish tekif kishiyavayu anonim v'yiskasa hashemesh, because you would realize right away if it became cloudy. If you're outside and you're kneading your dough and you're in a nice shady spot and suddenly you see it becomes overcast outside, it becomes cloudy, you know you'll stop right away. But inside the building, you have no idea. Inside the house, how are you going to know that it became overcast outside? You're going to have no idea. So inside the house, you can't do this, but outside you can. Continues the Ramah on the top line on Nunvav Amud Aleph. V'chein, similarly, yesh li zaher, you should take care. Melahoylech hamatzos, you should not transport the matzos latanur to the oven. Tachas harakia megula, uncovered under the open sky. Let's say your matzah baking process takes place outside, or maybe you're rolling out the matzahs inside and you have an oven outside. So you roll out the matzah inside and now you take it outside to the backyard to where the oven is. Make sure that you don't transport that unbaked matzah dough uncovered under the open sky. V'chein hamayim hayakemach. Similarly, the water that you're going to use to knead the matzah dough, or the flour that you're going to use to knead the matzah dough, should not be transported outside, uncovered, under the open sky. It brings this down from the Agas HaMaimoni in the name of the Smak in the Marivail. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cotton vav. V'chein yesh li zayer. Similarly, you should take care. Ritzaynai loymar. What the Ramah wants to say over here is the Asru Bagamara Lalosh Bimkaim Hashemesh Oy B'Yoyma De'iva. The same way the Gemara prohibits kneading the matzah dough in a sunlit place or outside on an overcast day, because then everywhere is considered warmed by the sun. Kain, similarly, yesh lizar, you should take care lechatchila laholich, that when you transport the matzah, you should not do it uncovered under the open sky. The gam kemi tam hanal, for the same reason. Shechayim hashemesh, because the heat of the sun mechamim lamayim may heat up the water oila kemach, or the flour, and now you'll be kneading your dough with warm water or warm flour, and that could be problematic. Ois cotton zayin, the Ramah said you should not transport the water, the flour, or the matzah megula uncovered. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cotton zayin. Elo yechasenu b'mapa. Rather, you should cover it over with a sheet. So if you do have to transport your unbaked matzah from inside the house out to the backyard, or your mayim, or your kemach, you should make sure to throw a sheet over it. And when you take it outside, it should not be uncovered under the open sky. Now the Mishnah Berurah points out, if you are doing this, you should not use the same sheet over and over again. If you're throwing some kind of a sheet or a towel over an unbaked dough, it's going to come in contact with that dough. A little dough may stick to it. Now you're going to use it again and again and again and again and again. If you're using it for more than 18 minutes, you have dough stuck to that towel or to that sheet that could become chametz. And now you're covering your matzah with that chametz stick of dough. Now you could wind up with a problem. So don't do that. Make sure to change it frequently. This is true when you're transporting the unbaked matzah or the mayim, the water, or the kemach, or the flour. Kemach, or the flour. Pirush, the explanation of what the Ramah is saying here is, Im hasakin psuchin lamalo. If you're transporting the flour in closed sacks, then you don't have a problem. But if you have an open sack, so now the sun is going to shine on the flour and it may heat up the flour. That's when you have the potential problem and you have to cover it with a mappa. But if you have closed sacks, you don't have this issue. Now we end off Sif Aleph over here. Let's go back to the words of the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, similarly, just like we're concerned with the heat of the sun, so too we are concerned with other sources of heat. V'lo yiskarev lolush eitzel hatanar. Do not come close to the oven when you're kneading your dough. In other words, if somebody has a little matzah baking facility set up in a room and he's got the oven on one end of the room where he's going to bake the matzahs, and now he wants to knead his matzah dough right here in front of the oven, that's a problem. You can't do that. Do not come close to the oven to knead your matzah dough because of the heat of the oven. The heat coming out of the oven will definitely have a warming effect on your dough, and that could speed up the chimutz process. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and test. Eitzel hataner. The words on the Mechaber were, do not knead the dough next to the tanner. What does this mean, next to the tanner? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hainu pi hataner. This is a reference specifically to the opening of the oven. It doesn't mean anywhere near the oven. It means opposite the opening of the oven. And the Mishnah Berurah is taking this from the Lashon of the Torah. This is what the Torah writes. The Torah says that you should not knead the matzah dough by the opening of the oven. That's where we're worried that the heat is emanating out from the oven and it may heat up your dough. Ubatstadim, however, on sides, or behind the oven, less lanba, that we're not worried about. She'ein achayim gadol sham, because the heat of the oven is not excessive towards the sides or around the back. Let's remember that these ovens have thick walls, so we're not afraid that the heat is emanating through the wall of the oven. And if you knead the dough around the side of the oven or in back of the oven, it's going to warm up your dough. But in front of the oven, and I can tell you, I spend a lot of time in front of the matzah oven in the matzah bakery, and boy, is it hot. I commented to the sheber, to the baker one year. I said, it's so funny. It's such a coincidence. Every matzah bakery I've ever been in, they always put the oven in the hottest room in the bakery. Such a rough job. Why don't they have any rachmanis on the baker? For heaven's sakes, put the oven in a cool room. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the Achrayim discuss this concept at length. Umas kanasam, and they conclude, their conclusion is the following. Debetaner shall beis hachorif. If you have an oven, beis hachorif means a winter house. I guess it's some kind of room or a winterized room that's made special for use during the winter. It has a furnace in it that's specifically meant to warm up that room and make it nice and warm. You're not allowed to knead the matzah dough in that room because that room is equipped with a furnace that is made to heat up the entire room. So this is in contrast to the type of oven that we were talking about previously, where we're not worried about the heat that emanates on the sides and on the back. We're only worried about the pi hataner. Not so with the beis hachorif. This winter room is equipped with a furnace that is specifically designed to heat up the whole room. In that case, we know that the heat of that oven does emanate throughout the room. Therefore, you cannot knead the matzah dough if that furnace is on, if that furnace is running. You can't knead the matzah dough anywhere in that room. Ella rather, if you want to knead the matzah dough in that room, you would have to make sure that that furnace is not fired up the entire day. And if that furnace was fired up, and now you want to use that room to knead your matzah dough, you would have to open up the door and the windows to that room until the heat that built up in that room escapes according to your evaluation. You have to open up the doors, open up the windows, and evaluate. Is the heat gone? If the heat is gone, then you could knead the dough. And then you could knead the dough. The same thing would be true by a regular oven. If you have some kind of oven that you're baking in the entire day, and the heat does build up in the whole house, so then you would not be allowed to knead the matzah dough anywhere in that room, in that house, if the heat is emanating throughout the house. You would have to open up the doors, open up the windows, and make sure the heat is escaping. Nevertheless, Indian, everything is going to be according to what's going on in that particular situation. If you're talking about a small room, and there's a tremendous amount of heat, or is it a large room and a small amount of heat? So basically, what the Mechaber is telling you over here, we see very clearly the concept in the Mechaber and in the Ramah. The concept over here is, if you have a heat source and now you're going to need matzah dough, you have to take care to make sure that your dough is not getting heated up by that heat source. And you have to judge the situation accordingly. And you have to judge, is it problematic or is it not problematic? If there's a problem, you have to do what you can to cool the room down. I know by us in the matzah bakery, we have all sorts of exhaust fans to make sure to draw the heat away from the piatanor. There's a hood right over the piatanor that's venting heat out, even though they're not kneading the matzah anywhere near there. The kneading of the matzah is done all the way in a different room. There is absolutely no heat from the matzah getting to that room. Even where the matzahs are, where the unbaked matzahs are laying on the large sticks that are used to put the matzahs into the oven, they're off to the side in another room. There's a mechitza, there's a wall in between, there's an opening where they pass those sticks through, but there are vent fans that are bringing in cold air from the outside, constantly circulating cold air from the outside around those matzahs to make sure that there's no way any of those matzahs are getting heated up from the heat source, which is the oven. What the Mechaber is worried over here is the heat of the matzah baking oven. Let's say you did need your matzah dough opposite the opening of the oven. The halacha would be the same as the halacha is if somebody needs his dough in a sunlit place. We're going to see that shortly in Seif Ayin Sham, and we're going to see that in that case, if somebody transgressed this prohibition and he did go ahead and knead his dough in the sunlight, or he kneaded his dough by the opening of the oven, now he has to judge. He has to see, did it get heated up or did it not get heated up? He has to judge, and the halacha would be accordingly. If it did get heated up, you can't use that matzah. If it didn't get heated up, in the evidence, it's okay. Veda, and the Mishnah Berurah says you should be aware. There are those who stumble over this halacha. There are those who are not careful and they're nichshal with this halacha. Kigarin, for example, ha'ifin, the commercial bakeries. Sheyesh mehan, there are those. Shabishah shahamatzah is biyadam al hamakel lahiridam lataner, when they're holding the matzahs on the sticks. So you have the people who roll out the matzah. Then how do they transport the matzah from where they got rolled out to the oven? They flap the raw matzah over a stick and they carry that stick to the oven. So when they have those matzahs in their hands, those raw matzahs on the sticks, lahiridum lataner, to put them down in the oven, umekarven oisal piataner, and they walk up to the oven, so they're bringing the oven mamish to the piataner, to the opening of the oven, because that's what they're doing. They're bringing the raw matzah to the oven to place it into the oven. But instead of bringing it to the oven and putting it down right away in the oven, heim shayhim, they wait. They sit down, they wait, and they delay putting the matzah into the oven. That's a problem. Or sometimes the Chavetz Chaim says it's even worse than that. They're holding a raw matzah, they bring it to the piataner, to the opening of the oven, to get ready to put it in the oven, and then they stop, and they turn around, they turn their head around, and they stopped, yapping with the people who are rolling out the matzah behind them. So they're holding a raw matzah, they bring it to the piataner, they stop, they turn around, and they start schmoozing with the people who are working on the matzahs. And in the meantime, this raw matzah is being held right outside the opening of the oven where it's nice and hot and it's getting heated up. It's not getting baked, it's not inside the oven, but it's getting warmed, which is going to speed up the chimutz process. V'hu iser gomer lefi hamavur kan. The Chavetz Chaim says this is mamish and iser. You're not allowed to do that. Similarly, we also have to take great care. Those sticks that hold the raw matzahs, we have to make sure to keep on changing over those sticks, not to use the same stick over and over and over and over. Because we see very clearly those sticks that are placed in the oven to place the matzahs down in the oven, they get heated up from the heat of the oven. So if you're going to take a stick and you're going to put it into the oven to put the matzahs down in the oven, and now you're going to take that stick out and put another raw matzah on it, so now you're putting a raw matzah on a hot stick, and that's going to warm up the matzah and speed up the chimutz process. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid here. The Chavetz Chaim says that many people stumbled over these issues. Baruch Hashem, in our bakeries, for the most part, I think we have this worked out into a system. I know that by me, the sticks that go into the oven are changed constantly, and they're cleaned between every shift. Not only are they cooled off, but they're also cleaned. So we have this down to a system. But when you're not doing it in a bakery where they know what they're doing, and they've been doing this for years, for decades, and they have it down to a system, you're doing it in a little private setup, which, what I understand right now, might be happening in some places. You have to take care of all of these halachas. You have to watch out for all of these concerns. Okay, now we go to Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber, Lo yanichu ha'isa b'loi esek. You should not leave the raw dough alone without it being worked, va'afilu rega echad, even for one moment. This is based on a mimer in the Gemara in Psachim. The Gemara says on Mem Beis Amud Aleph, the Gemara brings down from Rava. Rava said he was talking about a woman who's preparing the matzah. And Rava says, V'loi sagbia yada min hatanor. She should not remove her hand from the oven ad shetigmar es kol hapas, literally until the bread is finished. And Rashi explains over there, what does that mean? Rashi says, Koloimar tehei oisekes bebatzek kol shah. What Rav is telling you is, when a woman is engaged in the process of baking the matzah, she should not remove her hand from the dough even for a moment. You knead the dough, and then you work the dough, and then you roll out the dough into a matzah, and then you take it, you put it in the oven. Once you start with that process, you knead the dough, you don't leave it alone. Because once you leave it alone, that's when chimutz could start. Chimutz is going to start when the matzah is being left alone. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cotton Yud Aleph, I'm sorry. Lo yanichu ha'isa, do not leave the dough alone. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ritzaynai Loimar. What the Mechaber wants to say over here is, La'achar lishasa, after you knead the dough, Kaidem shehiskel la'aroich oisa, after you already begin, before you begin to roll the dough out, even though you might think, what's the danger right now of leaving the dough alone? Right now, there's no great danger in leaving the dough alone. I didn't warm the dough up yet so much with my manipulation with my hands. All I did was I kneaded the dough. So now I have a kneaded dough. Now, is there such a danger of chimutz that I have to make sure not to leave the dough alone, even for a moment? Says the Mishnah Berurah, yes, you can't leave the dough alone, even for a moment, even at that point. Now, if it's already after you rolled out the matzah, so then certainly there's even a bigger problem of leaving the dough alone, because now you warmed the dough up with all this manipulation. The Chavetz Chaim is telling me over here, even before the dough gets warmed up with all of this manipulation, you have to make sure not to leave it alone. Says the Mishnah Berurah Vayter, and Ice Cotton Yud Beis, Beloy Asik, do not leave the dough alone without working it. What does this mean, working it? What does this mean, Beloy Asik? Says the Chavetz Chaim, the Asik Mikri, working the dough means, Shaloshaisa, that you're kneading it, I'm Megalgala Be'etz, or you're rolling it out with the wooden rolling pin, Ukahai Gavna, or anything like that, where you're working the whole dough. That's what's called working the dough that prevents chimutz. But not like some are accustomed, that they want to say that they're working the dough so it can't become chametz. Lidchayk, to push at the dough. V'livay, to isa, and to beat the dough, ba'etz, with a wooden stick, b'makam echad, in one spot. Because that is not efficacious to make sure that you're not going to prevent chimutz in the whole dough. You have a whole dough over here. Imagine you roll down a long snake of dough over here, and you're going to break pieces for the matzahs, and you don't want to leave the dough without asik. So you're going to take a rolling pin, and you're going to sit there banging on one end of the dough. That's not effective. That doesn't do anything. Asik in the dough, the Mishnah Berurah says, is you have to be working the entire dough. Ice cutting Yud Gimel, the Mechaber said you shouldn't leave the dough alone, va'afilu rega echad, not even for one moment. Says the Mishnah Berurah, va'afilu einay oisik b'davar acher rak b'tzarchei ataner. This is true even if the only thing that you're busy with is you're still involved in the matzah baking process. What the Mishnah Berurah is coming to tell you over here is, don't think that what we're saying over here is that you shouldn't be mesiach das from the matzah baking process. That's not what we're discussing. That's not the problem. You might say, oh, I could stop working the dough if the reason I stopped working the dough is because I want to get the oven ready to bake the matzahs. No, that's not true. Even if what you're doing is you're busy in the matzah baking process, so you're getting the oven ready to bake the dough, so maybe you think now I could leave the dough alone. No, that's not true. The problem over here is not a problem of hesach hadas. The problem over here is not a problem of stepping away from the matzah baking process. The problem is that if you leave the dough alone, then the chimutz could start taking place, and we have to prevent chimutz, so you got to work the dough. There's a different problem if you're mesiach das from the matzah baking process. That's another problem. And that is that if you get busy with something else, you get on the phone and you start talking on the phone now you might lose track of time. You might not be watching the clock anymore, and you don't know how long this dough is sitting out. Maybe it'll become chametz mamish. But even without that problem, even if you're busy working on the oven, you still can't step away. You still can't stop working the dough, because then the chimutz will start. Gam kein hasa lechatchila. Therefore, the Mishnah Berurah says, when you're involved in matzah baking, you have to prepare the oven, you have to fire up the oven, and you have to shovel out the coals and everything else before you get busy with baking the matzahs, so that the oven is ready to put the matzah right in. So that you shouldn't have to leave the matzah alone without manipulating it, like we're going to discuss further. Okay, can we go? No, let's go back. We can still go back. Says the Mechaber Vayter, the Cholzman shemisaskim boy, as long as you are working with the matzah dough, afilu kol hayom einay machmitz. If you're working dough, then even if it stays raw and unbaked for the entire day, it will not become chametz. As long as dough is being worked, fermentation doesn't take place. Chimutz does not take place. And this comes from the Gemara B'Sachim, Amem Ches, Amem Beis. This actually comes from Brisa. The Brisa says, Kol zman she'oiskos bebatzek, as long as you're working a dough, einay ba lidei chimutz, it never becomes chametz. Says, is there a Mishnah Berurah here? No. Let's go weiter. V'em henichai b'loi esek shir mil. If you leave the dough alone without manipulating it, for the time it takes to travel the distance of a mill, and we'll discuss what that time is in a moment. Heavy chametz. That's when the dough becomes chametz. Dough becomes chametz when you leave raw dough alone for the amount of time it takes to walk the distance of a mill. That's when dough becomes chametz. The sheer mill, and what is that amount of time? What is that measure of time? Heavy revius shah, that is a quarter of an hour, 15 minutes. The chelek me esrim min hasha, plus 1/20th of an hour. 20th of an hour is 3 minutes. So according to the Machaber here, you have a quarter of an hour, 15 minutes, plus a 20th of an hour, that's 3 minutes, for a total of 18 minutes. Says the Mishnah in Ice Cotton Yud Daled. Heavy chametz. The Machaber said, if you leave the dough alone without manipulation for the sheer mill, that's when it becomes chametz. Says the Chavetz Chaim, this is true. This is true, even if you don't see any of the signs of chimut that we're going to discuss later. It doesn't matter. Once you left the dough alone for that measure of time, it is chametz. Now, what is the time period? What is the measurement of time at which the dough becomes chametz? Says the Mishnah Berurah Tezvav. The Mechaber said have a revius shah. The Mechaber said a quarter of an hour plus a 20th of an hour. Says the Chavetz Chaim. This is what we're all familiar with. The time of 18 minutes. The Chavetz Chaim says this amount of time discussed by the Mechaber comes out to 18 minutes. A quarter of an hour, 15 minutes, plus a 20th of an hour is 3 minutes, for a total of 18 minutes. Va'ayin b'biur halacha, and he tells me to look over here in the biur halacha. Now, if you look at the biur halacha, dibur hamaskal have a revius shah. Ayin Mishnah Berurah. He says, look in the Mishnah Berurah. The yesh paiskim shacholken al sherzeh. There are those who disagree with this widely known amount of time of 18 minutes. Ula did who? According to them, sheer mill, the amount of time that we call the amount of time it takes to travel a mill, who shlish shah is a third of an hour, which is 20 minutes. V'chelik tesvav min hashah, and add to that a 15th of an hour, which would be 4 minutes. So now we have 20 minutes plus 4, which would be 24 minutes. V'yesh mibali svarazu, there are those who use this same calculation, but they come up with a different amount of time. They say 22 and a half minutes. Unless you're talking about a situation where there would be a significant financial loss, we go with the time period of 18 minutes, and after 18 minutes, we consider that dough to be asr bahana. But if we're talking about a situation of significant financial loss or great financial loss, perhaps we could rely on these dissenting opinions. And as long as it's not 22 and a half minutes, and we wouldn't forbid that matzah unless we saw signs of chimutz. Okay, now we go back into the Mishnah Berurah and Ice Cotton Tezvav. By me, it's in the middle of the second line of that Mishnah Berurah. V'ayin b'biur halacha, the le'inyan malicha. When it comes to salting meat, we know after we shecht meat, we have to salt the meat to remove all of the dam. And guess what? The shear of malicha, how long does the meat have to be salted? It's also gamkein kidei shear hiluch mil. We use the same description of time, the amount of time it takes to walk a mill. But the Yeved ain't lahakal over there, we cannot be lenient. Elin kain shah esrim varba, unless we wait 24 minutes. Ay esrim u'shloisha minute al kolpanim, or at least 23 minutes. In other words, the Chavetz Chaim is telling you we're machmer by matzah and we're machmer by malicha. By matzah, we're machmer, and we say once 18 minutes passed, we're already going to forbid the matzah. We're going to ask the matzah. By malicha, we're also machmer, and we say, you know how long you have to salt it? For at least the longer amount of time of 24 or at least 23 minutes. But lechatchila, shiurayu kedei shir shah. We wait an hour. And we should not change from that amount of time. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We're going to stop over here by Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Tezayin. Thank you so much for joining me for this Torah learning. The schus of Torah learning should be Megan. It should protect Gans Klal Yisrael. Everybody should be safe. Everybody should have Yeshuas and Refuas. The Rabban Shalom should protect everybody. Those who need Refuas, the Rabban Shalom should send Refuas. The Rabban Shalom should have Rahmanis and protect everybody. And this should be behind us very, very, very soon. We should all be zeicher that we come out on the other side of this healthy and well, with a heightened appreciation for mitzvahs. We should come out of this improved. We should use this time to think into ourselves and ask ourselves how we can improve. Everybody be well. Thank you so much.